back to The Cure, Matt. Well, it
We
depends
are.
because you did that one album different than the rest of
I know I
us. So I
screwed up.
believe this is
One,
either the
two,
sixth
three,
or seventh
four.
time we've covered The Cure, depending on how
It's
you want to
seven.
categorize
If
that.
you're yeah,
Yeah,
because we did both Faith and 17 Seconds.
right.
But yeah, so this is Wish from The Cure. Comes in at number 132 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums. Number 10 in 1992. Number 742 of all overall. And it's The Cure's sixth highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, basically behind every other one that we've covered so far, with the exception of Faith. And this Wish did not make Rolling Stone's list, and The Cure come in at number 25 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. And I think in the opening montage you put in
I think
Friday
we
I'm in
put
Love,
Friday I'm
correct?
in Love, yeah, because that's the big single from this.
Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you think, Matt?
Well, yeah, God, I love The Cure, and I only know two songs on this, and they were ones that were Friday I'm in Love and A Letter to Elise, the ones I think were on the greatest hits album that I owned, and so this is just a nice treat to go back into them. I was curious because I knew Friday I'm in Love was like their big hit and the like kind of the upbeat nature of it, and I was wondering if I was going to get more upbeat Cure on this, and nope, not really. This is still pretty bleak. It's not
Well, it's like how Love
bleak,
Song
but
was on uh
Disintegration.
Disintegration,
Yeah.
and it does not persuade or presage anything on that album.
Or like
Presage, yeah.
what is it? The song off of Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. That was oh, Just Like Heaven,
Just
right?
Like
So
Heaven,
like,
yep.
yeah, exactly. So, but I just, man, The Cure they kind of have their lane. I wouldn't say that this is a drastically different sounding record than their other stuff. It's a very distinct Cure sound. They've got the reverb, the darker undertones. Robert Smith's voice is very distinct for sure, and it's there's parts of this that are really like a slower, like morose. Like a lot of this is kind of morose, but then there's more upbeat stuff on it as well. Like Cut, for example, that's a great example of like a song that's just got this driving, drum beat behind it, and it's kind of like a faster paced song. There's certainly sadness. There's a lot of breakup stuff here. A lot of why don't you love me? I wish you could love me the way that I still love you, or something like that. And it's just, man, this guy's sad, and you can see why this connects with so many people in terms of like, anybody going through a breakup. You're just gonna, pop a Cure album on, and you're gonna connect with it. So I thought this was extremely consistent, and I thought that the placement of Friday I'm in Love was really good, like smack dab in the middle of the record to kind of give you a little shot, like just, don't get too down here. We're gonna throw a little pop at you here. Wendy Time was an interesting song. It was that was a little bit of a funk riff happening there, so that took me by surprise a little bit. I thought it opened really strong with the song Open, and High was a little bit lighter, so it kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, but there still is overall that, kind of that morose, somber, depressing goth Cure sound. But it's so palatable to me. It's such a great song. There's such a great sound. There's a very distinct band. As soon as you start hearing, like a bass line or a guitar part or even like a keyboard part, there's just something about the production that's just very much of The Cure, and it's something that's really appealing to me. And they've done it again. It's another great record that I really enjoyed and was glad we got to cover it.
Yeah, I enjoyed the album. I this one though did bring up the question to me of, if you've heard an album before in a different form and it comes back again and you like it, but it feels like you've heard the album before, how do you rank an album like that? Because I don't know if there was anything on this album that hasn't been done on a Cure album before. Even when they did different types of songs on the album, which they did, don't get me wrong, I feel like I'd heard that song before. And so it was a hard album for me to analyze from that end of things, because I enjoyed listening to it. And I enjoyed listening to it because I enjoy the sound of The Cure.
Yep.
But, and I do have to caveat it, but like, do you hold it against somebody if they keep doing the same thing over and over again, even if it is a pleasant sound? What do you think? What's your take on that?
I think I'm okay with it. Yes, okay, you're right. If you're well, go by your how you rate the albums that you do for this podcast. You have like 6 different categories, and one of them is doesn't have to do with kind of like
Creativity, I guess, would be the
creativity.
category. Yeah, you'd say.
Okay, so you've got 5 other categories that you could go to. So would this hold up as much if it was, does it hold up as much because it has been done before? No, probably not. But I don't know, man. I don't put a ton of stock into that because at the end of the day, did I like the album? Was it enjoyable? Just because they've done the sound before, because a lot of metal albums are like that. Metallica did similar albums and we still liked those, right? It's not like Ride the Lightning was or Master of Puppets was any less than Ride the Lightning because they had done a lot of those things already. They just did them they just did them really well again. So I don't really hold too much against artists like that if I like the sound that they're going for, right? Now, if it's a more generic kind of boring sound or something that's really not interesting to me, then yeah, if you keep pumping out the same thing over and over again, it's not going to hold my interest. But because The Cure kind of is their own band, as I was saying, and even though other artists have tried to, incorporated elements of The Cure is still they are a somewhat unique band when you put all their components together, and I just really like it. So if you can do a solid album of that, then I'm all for it. I remember when we did Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, and I'd have to go back and listen to it again to be sure, but that one I felt like ebbed and flowed a little bit more than this one. I felt that there were moments of that I kind of lost interest. I didn't really find myself losing interest in this album, so I don't really view it as kind of like, well, have they done this before or not? Is this like a new direction that they're going to or not? I kind of go more about it. It's a personal reaction. And I go more, how much did I enjoy it? So I know that that's not saying as much for ranking them, right? Like this is the best Cure album. This is an objectively better album because of these things. It's more of a personal preference of, I just like the sound. I really enjoyed a lot of the beats. I enjoyed the bass lines and the vocals and the aura of the album. And so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no, I'm okay. And yeah, it's how I always knew this album was, it's sort of unfairly probably got defined in one of two ways, right? It's either the album that followed Disintegration, right, which is not I don't like to look at albums in that context. I do think they should stand on their own. And of course, some people are like, oh, the album that Friday I'm in Love is in, right? The two things. I've also heard it called The Cure's Happy Album. I get where that's coming from because there are more joyous songs and as upbeat as The Cure can be, right?
Yeah.
Like songs that are on here. So I get all of those things at one point. I agree with you though, Matt. It's a very, very good album. And I agree with you that I think it's more consistent even than some of the Cure albums we covered in the 80s, some of which I liked. Now, is it at the level of Disintegration or Pornography, the two I hold up, or Head at the Door, right? Like, no, it's not as good as those albums. But those were all albums that I ranked as amongst the best albums in the 80s. So let's set a realistic bar. And you're right, it is consistent. But like I said, I would like to see The Cure do something slightly different from time to time. Yeah. And that's really my only argument. We're in this era now where you see that the risks that bands of that era are taking, like whether it hits or not, U2 is doing something different, right?
Yes.
REM is reinventing themselves and stuff. And I kind of would have liked to have seen The Cure try something different. Now, would I have wanted them to make disco dance music or play the mandolin? Like, no. So I can understand why it could be a colossal failure as well. But that's really my only knock, is that it did have a little bit of been here, done that. But the lyrics are the guitar. I'll just say what I say a lot. Robert Smith is a completely underrated guitar player. I love his choices and I love the fullness and lushness of his guitar. I always think The Cure have great bass lines, even though it feels like the members of the band change a fair amount, so it's not always the same person, but the bass is pretty consistent along the way. You did mention The Cure has pretty much since the early albums, if you remember, where there's just such consternation about the production, which I understood because it was not great. on the early albums we covered. Ever since
Yeah.
that time, though, once we got to about Pornography on, the production has been immaculate on these Cure albums, to the point where you mentioned it as a feature of the Cure.
Absolutely.
But yeah, those early Cure albums were not like that. So it was interesting to always go back and hear that, and how they took control of it. Yeah, at its core, it's romantic music.
Yeah.
It's love songs, but and breakup songs and everything having to do with the concept of being in love, which is why I find the fact that like Robert Smith's been married for like 40 years to be fascinating. You know what I mean? Because it's like, are you experiencing this, or are you experiencing it by proxy? You know, I know his marriage is a little bit interesting from all accounts, but not in a bad way. But still, you know, you're married, so all this time. So this seems more just, and there is an element that like he's always writing about that feeling you get of young love to some degree, because he's never coming at the standpoint of like love in your 40s or 50s. He's sort of always writing from that teenage, early adult, you know, lane of things, which is not a bad thing, but it is kind of like after a while you're like, I'd be curious to see a different view of love from you. But hey, if you've got a lane, it's a good one. Stick with it. So
yeah, and I have said for years, I certainly appreciate it more when an artist or a band does something different, right? I want to go in a different direction. I want to reinvent myself or try this other thing on. And even if that fails, I still really appreciate when they do that, and I like it, because I think when it hits, that's really cool, right? When you can really, and it also shows you have more chops, right? There's more. You know, you have more pitches in your arsenal, right? So you're a better pitcher overall, a better artist, you know, because of that. So there is something to be said for that. But I also think that, like, you know what, at the same time, if you can hit on a singular note, and I don't want to say the Cure is just they do just one thing, because even in this album, like Friday I'm in Love is a very different song than many other songs on this album, right? And it's oddly enough, it's one of their more popular ones, and I still love it. Like, it's not that song to me, even as played out as it might be to some, I never get sick of that album. I think that's just they have. Every now and then they drop that pop perfection for me, you know. It just is like, I never get sick of it. It's just pure ear candy. So they can kind of go in some different directions and stuff like that. But the overall
does do
sound,
a lot of the guitar pedal on this compared to other albums, I noticed.
Yeah. So there's some variations, but yes, the core nature of the Cure is in this album, and it's in all of their albums in some way, shape, or form. Like, it's, you know, whether it's his voice or something about a guitar effect or something. Yeah, the exact synths. It's all kind of there, and it just makes them the Cure. So I am okay with both, and to me, it all has to do with the end product. How does it make me feel? Do I enjoy it? Do I connect with it? Does it have a good beat, melody? Is it interesting? You know, and I go more by that.
Fair enough. Yep. I mean, every album this week was a thumbs up for me.
Yes,
so
for sure.
To varying degrees. If you had to pick a favorite this week, what was your favorite?
I would say, I would probably say The Cure.
Okay. I would say a tie between the first two albums.
Yeah.
I think would be.
And it's very close, though. I really
agree.
had a very similar level of enjoyment with all of them. I wouldn't say that I was blown away by any of them, or they're going to crack my top 10 or 20.
Right.
They're not going to, for sure. But I had no problem going back to them, and I would have no problem going back to them again. So
I think we're on the same page, Matt.
Yeah.
That would be probably how I would define it too. So